For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. Since early this year, the United States administration under President Joe Biden has been showing signs of initiating a thaw with Pakistan after a period of tense relationship with Islamabad during the Trump presidency and a couple of months or at least a year under Biden's presidency. What are the reasons for this U-turn that has been initiated by DC as far as Pakistan is concerned is the subject of this week's Ask Nitin. I'm Nitin Gokhale. So what explains the new affinity that the United States administration is showing about Pakistan in its dealing in South Asia? Well, there are several reasons, but one of the reasons is, of course, the ouster of Imran Khan as Prime Minister of Pakistan. During his tenure as the Chief Executive of Pakistan, Imran Khan had decidedly taken an anti-US stand, and therefore the deep state in the US had decided to keep away from giving any help or any overt help to Pakistan during those years. Of course, there is a recent history. Under President Donald Trump, the Pakistanis were facing the heat from the US administration, which had cut off its periodic help for sustenance of F-16s and other military aid that Pakistan normally received from the United States, because Trump had understood that the problem in Afghanistan was not the presence of Taliban in Afghanistan, but the presence of Taliban and its supporters in Pakistan, the shelter that they got in Pakistan. Therefore, Trump had decided to keep Pakistan away and keep Pakistan under pressure. Of course, the Pakistanis have blamed India, and the newfound bonhomie between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi at that point in time, and the growing strategic relationship between India and the United States being responsible for Pakistan being neglected by the US. But since April this year, when Imran Khan was ousted as Prime Minister, DC has turned to Pakistan and has given enough indication that it is resetting ties with Islamabad and particularly with Rawalpindi, the general headquarters of the Pakistani army. So what are the indicators? I'm sure many of you know this. You read the newspapers, you read the headlines, and of course the geostrategic developments that happen in the South Asian region. But let me just refresh your memories. Since April this year, US has helped Pakistan get IMF bailout package for Pakistan worth about $1.1 billion, when it refused to help Sri Lanka at that point in time, when Sri Lanka, the island nation, was going through one of its worst phases economically. The second point one looks at, or one tries to refresh one's memory about how US is helping Pakistan, decision to give a $450 million package of sustenance for the F-16 fighter jets that Pakistan possesses, which are of course US origin, and the decision by Pentagon to revive the old package to supply spares and maintain F-16 fleet in the Pakistani Air Force came not just as a shock or a surprise to India, but also a shock and a surprise to many supporters of the India-US strategic partnership. India, of course, took up the matter with the United States and clearly told the people, the interlocutors in DC, that there is no way that India is convinced that this package for sustainment of the F-16 fleet is meant as a counter-terrorism tool that Pakistan would use against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and other militant groups operating in the boundaries between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
For someone to say, I'm doing this because it is for counter-terrorism, when you are talking of an aircraft like the capability of the F-16, I mean, everybody knows where they are deployed and what is the use and what is their capability. So, you're not fooling anybody by saying these things.
Of course, India has been blunt in telling this to the US because the India-US partnership has grown over the past 15 years. It has become robust, it has become more open and transparent when it comes to dialogue. But India was still surprised, and many of us in India knew that the pendulum had swung the other way again as far as U.S. Pakistan relationship is concerned. The third point why United States has decided to now support Pakistan in many of its critical areas is probably the fact that Ayman al-Zawahiri, the chief of Al-Qaeda, was killed in Kabul with a precision strike through a Hellfire missile in the capital of Afghanistan. Many believe that the intelligence, the INT, was supplied by Pakistani ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, which is its spy agency. And as a reward for that information, when the Pakistanis sold Zawahiri to United States, has meant that Pakistan is now firmly back in the saddle as far as its relationship with the United States is concerned, because that was a prize catch or prize target that the United States was looking for after killing Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad almost more than a decade ago, which of course had angered many Pakistanis because the US SEALs team had gone into Pakistan without informing or without being detected by the Pakistani radars and the Pakistani establishment. So since those dark days and the depth to which the relationship had tumbled, the United States and Pakistani relationship is back on its track and looks as if the new period of honeymoon has begun between the two lovers. Now, this of course goes back a long way, since the 1950s, when the United States chose Pakistan as an important geostrategic location and a country that would help it to reach out and sort of control the spread of the Soviet Union or the communist ideology. And Pakistan was regarded as one of the frontline states in the fight against communism by the United States. Of course, in 1979, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, Pakistan was used by United States to arm and fund the Mujahideen, who later became the rulers and who later, some of them turned into Taliban in Afghanistan. That's a different story. But that time Pakistan was very useful for United States. So it's a history that goes back a long way. And of course, we all know what happened when the global war on terror was launched following the 9/11 attacks in the United States. The US gave an ultimatum to Pakistan that if it doesn't cooperate in the global war on terror with the United States and root out the Taliban from Afghanistan and the Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan and elsewhere, it will also be bombed to Stone Age. One of the US officials said this to the Pakistanis that time, and General Musharraf, who was the ruler of Pakistan that time, turned the entire situation on its head and started cooperating and selling many of those Taliban assets, the Taliban fighters, to the United States. So Pakistan became another ally as far as the global war on terror was concerned. But then, as I mentioned, the slump came in the previous decade, and President Trump was very clear that the problem was not that the United States was fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. The problem was that the United States was not fighting the Taliban in Pakistan. And that's why the cold vibes between the Republican administration that time and the Pakistani establishment really meant that Pakistan was out of favor in Washington DC. But all that has changed in this few months, in the past 6 or 7 months, and I have already indicated 3 points which indicate the newfound bonhomie or friendship between the two. The final point I want to make about their friendship or their seemingly seeming upsurge in the relationship between the two countries is the fact that Pakistan has come out of the FATF grey list after remaining on that list, which is like a badge of dishonor for any country. for nearly 4 years, the longest time Pakistan has remained on that list. Surely because United States wanted it to come out of the FATF list, which has happened in October. So therefore, these points really tell us that US now wants to back Pakistan for whatever reasons. One of the main other reasons that I can think of is that United States is no longer present in Afghanistan, and it can now play the same games it had played in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and therefore it has started realigning or renewing its old ties with Pakistan. What does it mean for India? Well, India has been very pragmatic, and despite the upswing in the relationship between New Delhi and Washington DC, many members of India's national security establishment have been very careful in not completely aligning with the United States or doing the bidding of the United States when it comes to geostrategic decisions. So therefore, despite a lot of pressure, a lot of appeals by the United States, both privately and publicly, to condemn Russia in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, India has retained its neutral position on that war in Europe against Ukraine, because India's relationship with the Russians also goes back a long way, and India has been helped by the Russians in many strategic areas, with the United States has refused to do so for the past 6 decades or so. And therefore, the relationship between India and United States may have grown, the trade may have grown, the bonhomie amongst its defense forces may have grown over the past 15-20 years. In fact, there is a fact which cannot be denied, that Indian Army or Indian military and the United States military, Indian military does the largest number of joint exercises with the United States military compared to any other country in the world. And yet, despite the fact that this relationship has grown in certain sectors, and of course there is a dissonance as far as trade and commerce matters are concerned, but Indian national security establishment is wary of the United States as not so dependable ally, and that gets reflected in its approach, the United States approach to Pakistan. It has chosen Pakistan in the 1960s as a dependable ally over India, because India was a member of the non-aligned grouping. It has chosen to sustain Pakistani military. It has chosen to turn a blind eye to the Pakistani sins of commission and omission in Kashmir for a long time. And the recent developments does indicate that the democratic administration of President Joe Biden does go by the historic precedence of choosing Pakistan over India, despite the fact that India today is become important to the Quad, of which India is a member along with the United States, Japan and Australia. And despite the fact that United States would want India to be at the forefront of its containment strategy against China, the establishment in Washington DC seems to favor Pakistan, much to the annoyance, I won't say anger, but annoyance of the Indian establishment. And therefore, these 4 or 5 developments that have taken place of late. Other indication is that while Imran Khan was the Prime Minister, the dialogue between the two nations, Pakistan and United States, had sort of almost broken down. But since May this year, the Pakistani Army Chief Qamar Ahmed Bajwa, the Pakistani Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto have visited the US and have sort of tried to re-establish their connections, or Pakistan's connections, with the establishment in the US. So clearly the change in mood in Washington DC has come about because of these factors that I mentioned. So how does India react to it? I did mention India was annoyed, if not angered, but there are other factors that need to be taken into consideration. The United States might be looking to wean Pakistan away from China, which is seen as the iron brother of Pakistan over the long decades. It has now developed that relationship between China and Pakistan as a very strong bond. In fact, that famous saying by one Chinese president, that the relationship between China and Pakistan is sweeter than honey, higher than Himalayas and deeper than Indian Ocean, is something that one cannot forget. And therefore India has to be wary. While India's relationship with China has deteriorated over the past 2 years, its relationship with Pakistan has been on the back burner for almost 7 years now. There has been no dialogue, no official dialogue between the two countries, and India's problems are only going to increase, with United States also now turning, inexplicably for some, but not so surprising for some of us, that Pakistan is now getting increasing support from the US, not just because US wants to keep the Chinese at bay in Pakistan, but also as perhaps a signal to India that when it shows reservations about United States containment strategy against China and India does not buy it fully, it must comply with what United States wants, makes the entire equation very complicated. But that's something that has happened over the past 7 or 8 months, and that is something that we must take note of. And that's why this program today, where I have given you the bit of a background, bit of some anecdotes, and the reasons I think, or some of us think, that United States is turning increasingly friendly again to Pakistan. That's all I have as far as the opening statement is concerned, but I am glad that despite the midweek recording that we are doing for this program, we've got very intelligent questions from our viewers, and I'm going to take them one by one and try and answer to your satisfaction. So let me take the questions one by one. There is a comment on my Twitter feed by one of my followers, perhaps Rohit Singh, who says, rumors are doing the rounds that Pakistan supplied 155mm ammunition to Ukraine on US insistence. They are just being paid back for it. Well, it's all possible because United States is sourcing as much ammunition as possible from different countries to back Ukraine against Russia. But that just may not be the only reason. I am not inclined to discount that reason that you have mentioned. It's quite possible. But much has not been written about or reported about this particular aspect of that relationship, or the reason for that relationship going back into an upswing. But there are other questions from other viewers, and I'll take them one by one. One question is, given that the US isn't in Afghanistan anymore, what justifies these overtures to Pakistan given their strategic alliance with India? This is with respect to US. Well, I did explain during my talk what justifies this alliance with Pakistan, despite the US being seemingly close to India over the past 10 to 15 years. Well, the United States really is nobody's friend. It puts its own national interest above everything else, and the sooner some of us in India, some of the commentators, some of the people who look at US as our most trusted ally or most sought after ally or friend, realize that the United States is not dependable. It does not bother about anybody else's interest but its own, and therefore it is decided to send signal to India that you are not giving us what we want. You are not going all out against China. You are not becoming as active as we would want you to against China, and therefore we are keeping our options open with Pakistan. That is one of the reasons why this has happened. The second question is about the US has recently passed the CHIPS Act and cut off China's access to AI technology. What's the idea behind squeezing an aspiring hegemon and emboldening their minnow? Well, it's a two-track strategy, I would think. One is, of course, aimed at China, which has now emerged as the strategic challenge to United States, and is trying to fast close the gap on technology, science, and military with the United States, and that is China. And therefore, that CHIPS Act is aimed at cutting down China to size whereas Pakistan, which geographically is important to United States for its outreach to the Central Asian republics, to South Asia, and to keep India off balance. Pakistan is useful in many ways to the US, and therefore this perhaps outreach and resurgence in its ties with Pakistan. That's my answer to the question that you have talked about. And the third one is this US behavior largely driven by the inherent diverse demographic makeup of the Democratic Party versus the Republicans, who are largely white, Islamophobic and hard right? Well, that may be so, and we'll have to see how the next administration in the US deals with Pakistan. Will it be a Republican administration? We don't know. Going by the midterm results in US, the opinion about the Biden administration is divided amongst the voters, and the Democratic Party in the US, of course, has traditionally been a big supporter of Pakistan vis-a-vis India. And when you look at the balance of power between the two nations, US has always sought to prop up, not just China but the US too, has sought to prop up Pakistan against India, because India has shown strategic autonomy over the past so many decades, and therefore the US would want to send signals once in a while that we have other options in Southeast Asia, or in South Asia rather. So therefore I am not surprised that this is what is happening as far as the US-Pakistan relationship is concerned. And you are right, the viewer who has sent this question, that the Republican Party on the other hand, as opposed to the Democratic Party, is sort of more critical and more cautious about Pakistan. But that doesn't seem to happen right now, because the Democrats are in power. The president is a Democratic party member, and it's a Democratic administration. Therefore, one would think that Pakistan is slowly emerging out of its isolation in the US and may benefit now both tangibly and intangibly from the new approach in DC vis-a-vis Pakistan. But that's the real politic. India is aware of it, and India will deal with it when some difficulty arises, but that has not impinged on the growing US-India partnership, and these wrinkles will of course remain. And the biggest wrinkle in the US-India partnership will be Pakistan, has been Pakistan, and is Pakistan as far as this region is concerned. So that's all I have this week. It's an interesting triangle, you can say. There is the geopolitics is in a churn across the world. Europe is facing the heat because of inflation brought about by the war that nobody wanted. India is of course the large economy which is growing the fastest, but it has its own demographic problems, the domestic problems about number of jobs that it needs to create much faster than it is doing right now. But India is still relatively in a stable and a stronger situation economically than most other countries in Europe and even in the US, where the inflation has reached disproportionate heights which have never been seen by the population in the United States. Therefore, the churn and India's continuing friendship with Russia and its tense but stable or tense but kind of open negotiating tactic that India is doing with China has meant that India is now the flavor of the season as far as the region and the wider Asian continent is concerned. And the US may have chosen to reopen or re-energize its ties with Pakistan, but it does not necessarily mean that it's going to downgrade its ties with India, notwithstanding the fact that there is no US ambassador to India for the past 22, 23 months. Now, chew on that fact, and we will meet again next week. You know where to send your comments and feedback, and of course do subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you haven't already done it, I know your friends can subscribe to it, your family can do, your acquaintances can do, so do spread the word. And of course, follow our handles on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, which will give you all the necessary updates as they come in and as Strat News puts them up. For the time being, it's goodbye.